The coffee mug in my hand was blue, a specific, deep shade of ceramic blue that reminded me of the tiles in the kitchen we had renovated 3 years prior. I remember staring at the jagged white chip on the rim where I had once knocked it against the granite countertop, tracing the imperfection with my thumb while Veronica sat across from me at the breakfast table. It was a Saturday morning, and the sun was streaming through the bay window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. But the light felt cold. We had been Alex and Veronica for 12 years, a dozen years of building a fortress against the rest of the world, or so I had believed. We were the couple our friends used as a metric for stability, the ones who finished each other's thoughts and navigated social events with a practiced, synchronized rhythm. But sitting there that morning, watching her butter a piece of toast with a surgical precision that avoided my gaze entirely, I realized that the silence between us wasn't peaceful. It had mass. It was a heavy, physical thing pressing against my eardrums, demanding to be acknowledged. The erosion of our marriage hadn't happened with a catastrophic event. At least not initially. It had happened in the quiet, unobserved moments that I was now replaying in my mind with the torture of hindsight. It was the way she had started taking her phone into the bathroom for showers that stretched into 40-minute sessions. It was the subtle flinch, a movement of just a fraction of a millimeter, whenever I rested my hand on the small of her back while we stood in line at the grocery store. It was the sudden, intense dedication to a new project at her firm, an assignment that apparently required late nights, weekends, and constant communication with a consultant named Stefan. I knew the name. Stefan was a man we had entertained at dinner parties, someone with a laugh that was always a decibel too loud and eyes that lingered on surfaces and people a little too long. I had never viewed him as a threat because I was arrogant enough to believe that the history Veronica and I shared was an impenetrable shield. I thought a decade of shared taxes, grief, joy, and routine was enough to inoculate us against the virus of novelty. I was wrong. I failed to understand that history is just weight, and sometimes people get tired of carrying it. The discovery was an accident of technology, a glitch in the matrix of her deception that shattered my reality on a rainy Tuesday. Veronica had left early for a client breakfast, leaving her iPad on the kitchen island. I was rushing to find a recipe for a dinner I wanted to cook that evening. A futile, pathetic gesture of affection had planned to bridge the widening gap between us. We shared the passcode, a combination based on our anniversary, and I unlocked the device expecting to see a browser window. Instead, it opened to her photo gallery. She must have been reviewing it before she left. It wasn't a static image that dismantled my life. It was a live photo. It was one of those 3-second clips that capture the moments before and after the shutter clicks, preserving the context of a memory. The main image was innocuous enough, just a selfie of her smiling against a blurry background of a restaurant I didn't recognize. But when my thumb lingered on the screen, the image sprang to life, and the audio engaged. I heard a voice that was not the background hum of a busy cafe, but a whisper right next to the microphone. It was Stefan's voice. He was remarking on how beautiful she looked when she was hiding something. And then, in that looped video, I watched my wife's face transform. Her smile shifted from the bright, practiced expression she wore for social media to something softer, darker, and infinitely more intimate. She looked at the camera at him with a hunger and a familiarity that she hadn't directed at me in years. She laughed, a sound that invited him in rather than pushing him away. I froze. My brain, usually so analytical and capable of parsing complex data, simply stalled. I played the clip again, and again. I must have stood there for 20 minutes, a statue in my own kitchen, watching my wife flirt with another man in a 3-second loop. The timestamp was from the previous day, right around lunchtime, when she had texted me claiming she was eating a salad at her desk while catching up on emails. The sensation wasn't pain, not at first. It was total disorientation, as if gravity had shifted 90 degrees and I was suddenly falling sideways. Once the dam broke, I couldn't stop myself. I scrolled. I found the folder of recently deleted items, the digital graveyard where the guilty tried to bury their secrets. There they were, screenshots of text messages detailing their desires, photos of wine glasses touching, a picture of her hand holding his, their fingers interlaced on a tablecloth that wasn't ours. I sat down on the kitchen floor, the cold tile seeping through my jeans, feeling physically sick. A nausea roiled in my gut that had nothing to do with food. This wasn't just a mistake or a lapse in judgment. This was a parallel life. She wasn't just visiting Stefan. She was living with him in the hours she stole from me. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I went to work like a ghost haunting my own routine. I don't remember driving there. I don't remember a single task I completed that day. All I could hear was the echo of that whisper from the video. When I returned home that evening, she was already there, chopping vegetables in the kitchen. The domesticity of the scene was grotesque. It felt like watching a play where I was the only audience member who knew the tragedy coming in the third act. She looked up and asked how my day was, offering a thin, strained smile. I looked at her, really looked at her, searching for the woman I had married, the woman who had sworn to stand by me. I couldn't find her. All I saw was a stranger wearing my wife's face. I told her that my day had been enlightening. The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. She paused, the knife hovering over a red pepper, and asked why I would use such an odd word. I placed the iPad on the counter between us, face up. I told her that I had learned a lot that day. I watched the color drain from her face, a biological reaction to the sudden exposure of truth that was almost fascinating in its speed. She didn't ask what I meant. She knew. The guilt had been sitting just beneath her skin, waiting to be pierced. When she tried to speak, I simply said Stefan's name. I threw it into the air, between us like a grenade, and watched the explosion in her eyes. She dropped the knife. It clattered loudly on the cutting board. She began to stammer, trying to weave a web of explanations, but I cut her off. I demanded she explain how holding hands with another man fit into her narrative of innocence. I asked her which part of our wedding vows included an exclusion clause for boredom or the excitement of a new conquest. The confrontation that followed was ugly, a desperate, clawing thing stripped of any dignity. She cried. She paced the room. She tried to reach out and touch me, and when I recoiled as if burned, she collapsed onto the floor in the same spot where I had sat that morning. She claimed that it wasn't what I thought. She tried to tell me that it had started as nothing, that they were just talking, that he listened to her in a way she felt I no longer did. She tried to weaponize her own unhappiness, blaming her infidelity on my perceived distance, as if my distraction was a justification for her betrayal. I refused to accept that narrative. I told her that she couldn't blame me for her decision to strip naked with another man. I told her that if she had been unhappy, she should have screamed, she should have shouted, she should have dragged us to therapy or simply left. I told her that betrayal is not a reaction to loneliness. It is a fundamental flaw in character. She swore it was over. She claimed she had ended it the previous week, a lie I immediately recognized given the timestamp on the video I had found. She promised to cut him off, to quit her job, to do anything to save the life we had built. She was bargaining for her safety, for the comfort of the home I provided. Not for me. The weeks that followed were a descent into a specific kind of hell. We made the mistake of staying in the same house. It was like living in a morgue. I moved into the guest room, and every sound she made grated on my nerves. The sound of her blow dryer in the morning, a sound that used to signal the start of our day, now sounded like a siren. I stopped eating. I lost 15 pounds in a month. I would lie awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying that live photo on an infinite loop. I imagined them together. I imagined the conversations they had about me, painting me as the oblivious, boring husband to justify their excitement. The humiliation was a physical weight, a coat of lead I couldn't take off. I tried to forgive her. I read books on surviving infidelity. I scoured online forums where people asked if a marriage could survive such a breach. The experts said yes, provided there was radical honesty. So, we tried. We sat on the couch on Friday nights, drinking wine that tasted like vinegar, attempting to have honest conversations. But every time she spoke, I wondered if she was acting. When she professed her love, I questioned if she meant it or if she was simply saying the lines required to keep the house and the lifestyle. The trust was gone, and without trust, love is nothing more than a terrifying freefall without a parachute. I became a detective in my own life. I checked the phone bill. I checked the odometer on her car. I became paranoid, bitter, and sharp-edged. I hated the man I was becoming. I was turning into a jailer. She was the prisoner, and our home was the cell. The decision finally came to me on a Sunday afternoon while I was raking leaves in the backyard. The physical labor was the only thing that quieted the noise in my head. Veronica came out onto the patio, holding 2 mugs of tea, looking hopeful. She had that look on her face that suggested we could simply start over. She suggested we book a trip to Italy for the following summer, a trip we had always talked about. I stopped raking and leaned on the handle, looking at the dead leaves around my boots. I looked up at her and saw the desperation in her eyes. She wanted to paste a veneer of luxury over the rotting wood of our relationship. She wanted to pretend. I told her I wasn't going to Italy. When she asked why, confusing my refusal with budget concerns, I told her simply that I wasn't going to be there next summer. The silence returned, heavy and absolute. She asked what I was saying. I told her that I was done. The words tumbled out not with anger, but with a sudden, intense relief. I explained that I couldn't live as the man who checked her phone, the man who wondered who she was thinking about when she closed her eyes. I told her I deserved to be the protagonist of my own life, not the obstacle in hers. When she cried out that she had chosen me, that she had chosen to stay, I corrected her gently. I told her that she hadn't chosen me. She had been caught. There was a profound difference. Moving out was a surreal disassembly of a life. We divided books. We argued over who bought the espresso machine. It was petty and small and heartbreaking. I left the house, the fortress I had built, to her. I couldn't stay in the scene of the crime. I rented a small apartment in the city with exposed brick and pipes that rattled. It was empty, but it was honest. The first night I spent there, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, was the first night I slept through the night in 6 months. It was lonely, but the air was clean. It has been 14 months since that Tuesday with the blue mug. Veronica still texts me occasionally. I heard she is with Stefan now, or perhaps not. It doesn't matter. They can build a foundation on sand if they wish. I am rebuilding. I am learning to trust again, though it is slow, like learning to walk after a severe injury. I have learned that betrayal is a fire that burns everything down: the past, the future, the ego. But the ash it leaves behind is fertile. I am growing a backbone. I am growing a sense of self-worth that isn't tied to someone else's approval. I have learned that being alone is infinitely better than being in the company of a liar. If I could impart anything to someone standing in the wreckage of a similar discovery, holding the evidence that has just shattered their world, it would be this: do not let their failure define your worth. Do not let their inability to be loyal convince you that you are not enough. You are the sky. They were just a cloud passing through. Clouds are heavy, and they block the sun, and they can rain on you until you feel like you're drowning. But clouds move. They always move. The sky remains. I am Alex. I am a divorced man. I am a man who was cheated on. But more importantly, I am a man who survived the truth, and I would rather be here, in this quiet, honest apartment, than back in that beautiful house, deafened by the noise of a lie.